They were one of the biggest rock bands of the late 80s and early 90s, riding high on platinum records, sold-out tours, and a rebellious image that screamed excess. But behind the scenes, egos clashed, tempers flared, and one explosive feud would tear the band apart forever. This is the story of how Skid Row and their iconic frontman Sebastian Bach went from rock and roll glory to a breakup so bitter they've never spoken again. Skid Row's story began in 1986 in New Jersey, when guitarist Dave "Snake" Sabo met bassist Rachel Bolan at a local music shop. The two quickly formed a creative partnership.
He was referring to a slave to the grind, and Sebastian and Rachel, hi, welcome to Rockline.
Hi.
How's the tour going?
Oh!
And recruited guitarist Scotty Hill and drummer Rob Afuso to round out the lineup. In 1987, they found the missing piece. 19-year-old Canadian frontman Sebastian Bach, whose charisma and soaring vocals would help launch the band into the rock stratosphere. With Bach on board, Skid Row released their self-titled debut in 1989, an album packed with sleazy riffs, power ballads, and a rebellious spirit that fit perfectly into the hair metal era. Hits like Youth Gone Wild, 18 and Life, and I Remember You propelled the album to multi-platinum status. But the true breakthrough came in 1991 with Slave to the Grind, which became the first heavy metal album to debut at #1 on the Billboard charts. Skid Row had become one of the biggest bands in the world seemingly overnight. Bach was a huge part of that success. Tall, loud, and unapologetically wild, he embodied the over-the-top image that glam metal thrived on. His voice, equal parts power and attitude, cut through the heavy guitars like a razor. He was the face of the band, the one the cameras loved and the fans idolized. But behind the scenes, not everyone appreciated the spotlight he demanded or the chaos he brought with him. From the early days, there were tensions between Bach and the rest of the band. Creative differences began to bubble up. Bach pushed for songs that were fast, heavy, and commercially viable. Meanwhile, other members, particularly Bolan and Sabo, wanted to explore a more punk-influenced, stripped-down direction. Disagreements over songwriting credits, set lists, and artistic control grew more frequent. Bach had a forceful personality and didn't shy away from confrontation. He later admitted to outright refusing to sing certain songs he didn't like, telling the band, "I didn't get into this rock and roll band to sing songs that suck." That kind of candor didn't go over well. Bolan, in particular, was fed up with Bach's ego, describing him years later as someone who was playing a role and would break down when challenged. The relationship began to fracture, with Bach on one side and the rest of the band on the other. The band's internal issues were further strained by the changing tides in music. By the mid-90s, grunge and alternative rock had taken over. Bands like Nirvana and Pearl Jam were dominating the charts, and the flashy glam metal scene was rapidly falling out of favor. Skid Row, once darlings of MTV, found themselves fighting to stay relevant in a world that now viewed their sound and their look as dated. Bach wanted to lean harder into heavy metal to counter the grunge wave. The others weren't so sure. This only widened the creative rift. The final straw came in 1996. Skid Row was offered an opening slot on Kiss's reunion tour, a dream gig for Bach, who idolized the band. He accepted the offer without consulting his bandmates, assuming they'd be on board. But Sabo and Bolan were insulted. They saw the gig as a step backward for a band that once headlined arenas on its own. Worse, they were furious that Bach had made a decision on their behalf. The fallout was immediate and ugly. Bach left a furious, expletive-laced voicemail for Sabo, calling him a spineless sucker. Sabo played the message for his mother, then picked up the phone and fired Bach. It was the end of the original Skid Row lineup. In the aftermath, both sides tried to move on. Skid Row entered a long hiatus, then regrouped in 1999 with a new vocalist, Johnny Solinger. They released new albums and continued touring, but the spark of the original band was gone. Bach, meanwhile, launched a solo career that included music, Broadway performances, and reality TV appearances. He remained in the public eye, but never regained the platform Skid Row had given him. Despite their split, fans never stopped hoping for a reunion. Every interview, every backstage sighting sparked rumors. Bach would tease it. One email, he said, could fix all this. He extended olive branches in interviews, on social media, and even on stage. "I'll never close the door," he told Rolling Stone. "I'll always be open to doing something again." But the rest of the band has remained firm. Sabo, Bolan, and Hill have all made it clear they have no desire to work with Bach again. "It's not gonna happen," Sabo said in a 2020s interview. "We enjoy being happy in this band." Money, he added, wasn't a factor. Peace of mind was worth more than any reunion check. Over the years, Skid Row has cycled through several singers, including Tony Harnell and Eric Grunwald. Despite their efforts, none have managed to fully capture the chemistry or public attention the band had during the Bach years. While fans still turn out to hear the classics, it's clear that the original magic has never quite been recaptured. The gulf between Bach and his former bandmates seems wider than ever. What was once creative tension has calcified into silence. There have been no public meetings, no reconciliatory phone calls, just a cold, unresolved feud that stretches back nearly 30 years. The kind of feud that becomes legend, not just in the press, but in the hearts of fans who wonder what might have been if egos had been checked, if tempers had cooled, if one conversation had gone differently. In truth, Skid Row never recovered from the split. The tension that had built up over years of touring, writing, and living in close quarters eventually blew the band apart. The result was a fractured legacy. A handful of classic albums, a bitter divide, and decades of what could have been. The Bach-Skid Row feud is a textbook example of what happens when creative ambition, ego, and fame collide. It's the story of a frontman who was both a gift and a curse to his band, a lightning rod for success and for conflict. It's also a reminder that even the strongest musical partnerships can be undone not by failure, but by success. In the end, both Sebastian Bach and Skid Row have survived, but neither has reached the heights they once shared. The damage from their split has lingered for nearly 3 decades, etched into rock history as one of the genre's most dramatic and most permanent breakups. And in a way, that's what makes this story so compelling. It's not just about a band breaking up, it's about pride, it's about timing, it's about how, in rock and roll, some wounds never heal, no matter how many years pass, no matter how many fans beg for one more encore. It's a story not just of what was, but what will never be again. Thanks for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to leave a like and subscribe with notifications on to never miss a video.